Ambassador Nora stood in the Great Hall of the Galactic Council and watched 50 alien species decide the fate of humanity. The chamber was enormous, built from white stone that seemed to glow under soft blue lights. Each species had its own section, its own seats, its own translator systems. Humanity's section was the smallest, tucked away in a corner where the lighting was poor and the acoustics were worse. Nora had served as humanity's voice here for 12 years. She had learned to speak carefully, to smile when she wanted to scream, to accept small insults as the price of survival in a galaxy where humans were still considered children. Her hair had turned gray in this chamber. Her patience had been tested 1,000 times. But she had always believed that if humans proved themselves reasonable and helpful, the Council would eventually accept them as equals. Today she learned how wrong she had been. High Arbiter stood at the central podium. He was a species of tall beings with silver skin and 4 arms. They had ruled the Council for 300 years. They considered themselves the species in known space, looked down at the human section with something that was not quite contempt but was certainly not respect. "The motion before us is simple," said. His voice was deep and carried easily through the chamber. "Humanity has held provisional voting rights for 60 years. The question is whether they should be granted full membership or whether their voting rights should be suspended until they demonstrate greater maturity." Nora felt her hands tighten on the railing in front of her. She had not expected this. The Council was supposed to vote on a trade agreement today. This motion had appeared on the schedule only 3 hours ago, too late for humanity to mount any defense. "The evidence is clear," continued. "Humans are impulsive. They act on emotion rather than logic. They have only been spacefaring for 2 centuries. Compare this to the experience of 4,000 years or the experience of 3,000. Humans are infants in galactic terms. We do them no favors by pretending otherwise." Nora pressed the button to request speaking time. Her light joined a queue of 3 others, ignored all of them. "I call for an immediate vote," said. "All in favor of suspending human voting rights until a future review, please indicate now." The voting lights began to flash. Green for yes, red for no. Nora watched as green lights spread across the chamber like a disease. Species she had thought were friendly voted against humanity. Species she had helped in trade negotiations voted against humanity. Species whose children had been saved by human doctors voted against humanity. The final count appeared on the central display: 47 in favor of suspension, 3 against. Nora looked at the 3 red lights. They had voted no. So had 2 other minor species, the and the. These were species who themselves faced discrimination, who knew what it felt like to be dismissed as lesser. High Arbiter smiled. It was a thin smile, satisfied and cold. "The motion passes. Human voting rights are suspended effective immediately. The human delegation may remain as observers if they wish, but they will have no voice in Council proceedings until such time as the Council determines they have matured sufficiently." The chamber was quiet. Some species looked uncomfortable. Most did not seem to care at all. Nora stood very still. 12 years of work had just been erased in 12 minutes. 12 years of patience, of compromise, of swallowing her pride for the good of her species. All worthless. All thrown away by beings who had never seen humans as anything but amusing primitives. She thought about the speech she could give. She could remind the Council of every time humans had helped them. She could list the treaties humans had negotiated, the wars humans had prevented, the diseases human doctors had cured. She could beg for reconsideration. But she looked at satisfied face, and she understood something important. Words would not change anything. Humans could talk for another 60 years, and the Council would still see them as children. The Council did not respect human words because the Council did not respect humans. Nora reached up and removed her translation earpiece. The device was small and silver, designed to fit comfortably in a human ear. She had worn it every day for 12 years. She set it carefully on the podium in front of her. Then she turned and walked toward the exit. "Ambassador," called out, "where are you going? Do you not wish to address the council?" Nora did not turn around. She did not speak. She simply walked out of the chamber, her footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. 3,000 light-years away, on a space station orbiting a red dwarf star, Human Trade Representative Lane received an emergency message. He read it twice, then removed his own earpiece and placed it in a drawer. On the colony world of New Portland, Governor Sandra Wells received the same message. She called her entire staff together and gave them simple instructions. They would continue to work. They would continue to trade. But they would not speak to any council species. Not one word. On Earth, the President addressed the United Nations. The speech was broadcast to every human settlement in the galaxy. "For 60 years we have given the Council our words," the President said. "We have explained ourselves, we have justified ourselves, we have begged for acceptance. Today the Council told us our words are worthless. Very well, we take them back. From this moment forward, no human will speak to any Council species. We will honor our existing contracts. We will maintain peaceful relations, but we will not waste our breath on those who refuse to listen. This is the silence protocol. It begins now." Back on Prime, Counselor of the watched the human delegation quarters go dark. She was one of the 3 who had voted against suspension. She had tried to warn that this was a mistake. He had laughed at her. She did not think he would be laughing for long. High Arbiter dismissed the concern when his aides brought it to him. "Humans are emotional creatures," he said. "They will sulk for a few days, perhaps a week. Then they will return, apologize for their rudeness, and accept their place. This is simply a tantrum. Ignore it." But a week passed and the humans did not return. A month passed, and human ships still flew through Council space. Human merchants still traded at stations, but not one human spoke a single word to any Council species. They communicated through written messages, through automated systems, through intermediaries from non-Council species. The silence had begun, and the Council had no idea what it had started. 3 months had passed since the Council vote, and the galaxy was beginning to feel strange. Counselor walked through the trading district of Prime and watched the changes that had crept into daily life. Human merchants still ran their shops, still sold their goods, still smiled politely at customers, but they did not speak. When a customer asked about prices, the human pointed to a display screen. When a trader tried to negotiate, the human handed over a tablet with typed responses. The transactions were completed efficiently, professionally, and in complete silence. At first, the Council species had found this amusing. Humans and their drama, they said. Humans and their wounded feelings. But 3 months of silence had worn away the amusement. There was something unsettling about interacting with beings who looked at you, understood you, and chose not to answer with their voices. Had arranged a secret meeting. She had traveled to the human station called Harmony Gate, far from Council oversight. The station hung in orbit around a gas giant, its lights glittering against the orange and brown clouds below. It was a trading hub, one of the busiest in this sector, and it was run entirely by humans. Station commander met her at the docking bay. He was a tall man in his mid-40s, with short dark hair and the bearing of someone who had spent years in military service. He shook her hand firmly but did not say a word. Instead, he handed her a small tablet. "Welcome to Harmony Gate, Counselor. Please follow me." Followed him through the station corridors. The station was clean and well-maintained. Human workers moved past them, nodding politely but never speaking. Music played softly from speakers in the walls. Realized she had not heard human music in months. The Council chambers had always been filled with human conversation, human laughter, human arguments. Now there was only this strange quiet. Led her to a meeting room with a window overlooking the gas giant. He gestured for her to sit and took a seat across from her. Between them on the table was another tablet. Spoke first. "Commander, I want you to know that I voted against the suspension. I tried to stop it." Typed on his tablet. The words appeared on a screen on the wall so could read them easily. "We know. We remember who stood with us and who did not. Then you must understand that not everyone on the council agrees with what happened. There are those of us who want to make this right." Typed again. "Making it right would require more than words. The council told us our words were worthless. Why would we believe that council words are any different?" Felt the weight of that response. She had spent her career in diplomacy, believing that dialogue could solve any problem. But how could she argue for dialogue with beings who had been told their voices did not matter? "What would it take?" she asked. "What would convince humans to speak again?" Was quiet for a long moment. Then he typed slowly, as if choosing each word with care. "We gave you our words for 60 years. You told us our words were worthless, so we take them back. You cannot buy them with promises. You cannot threaten them out of us. They are ours, and we will decide when to use them again." Read the message 3 times. She understood now why his predictions had been so wrong. He had expected humans to come crawling back, desperate for council approval. He had not understood that humans did not need council approval. They had their own economy, their own fleet, their own colonies. The council was useful to them but not essential. And there was something else had not understood. Humans had been the galaxy's mediators. Every species had ancient enemies, old grudges, bitter histories. Humans had none of this. They were too young to have blood feuds with anyone. When two species needed to negotiate but could not trust each other, they called in humans. Humans had mediated more peace treaties than any other species in council history. Now that role sat empty. "Commander," said carefully, "I am not asking you to speak to the council. I am asking you to help me understand. What do humans want to happen next?" Typed his response. "We want nothing from the council. We will continue our lives. We will trade, we will travel, we will work. But we will not speak to those who do not value our words. If the council wants human voices back, the council must earn them." Returned to Prime with a heavy feeling in her chest. She requested a meeting with High Arbiter, but he refused to see her. His aides told her the human situation was not a priority. 2 weeks later, the priority changed. The Enda had been rivals for centuries. Their territories shared a disputed border, and both species claimed the same 3 star systems. For decades, human mediators had kept the peace. They had arranged shared mining rights, joint patrols, and cooling-off periods when tensions rose. Now there were no human mediators, and tensions had been rising. The first shots were fired over a mining asteroid. A patrol ship destroyed a freighter that had entered disputed space. They retaliated by attacking a colony outpost. Within a week, both species had mobilized their fleets. The council called an emergency session. Both the and the demanded neutral mediation. Both species requested human mediators specifically. The request was sent to human diplomatic headquarters on Earth. 3 days later, it was returned unopened. High Arbiter stood in the council chamber and for the first time looked genuinely worried. "We will find other mediators," he announced. "They have offered their services." But they did not trust the who had sided with thee in a trade dispute 20 years ago. And they did not trust the who had cultural ties to the. Every species in the council had some historical connection that made them unacceptable to one side or the other. Only humans had been neutral. Only humans had no old grudges. Stood and addressed the chamber. "High Arbiter, perhaps we should reconsider the human situation. If we were to restore their voting rights and offer a formal apology, they might be willing to assist with this crisis." His 4 arms tightened at his sides. "The council does not apologize to species that throw tantrums. The humans will return when they are ready. Until then, we will manage without them." But managing without them was proving harder than anyone had expected. The border was burning. Ships were destroyed every day. Soldiers died every hour. and the humans watched in silence, their voices locked away, their help unavailable to those who had told them they had nothing worth saying. On Harmony Gate, Commander stood at his window and watched the distant stars. Somewhere out there, beings were dying in a war that humans could have prevented. It hurt to know this. It hurt to do nothing. But remembered the council chamber. He remembered 60 years of patience rewarded with contempt. He remembered being told that humans were too immature to have a voice. The humans had found their voice now. It was the loudest silence the galaxy had ever heard. 8 months into the silence, the galaxy was falling apart. The border war had spread like fire. What started as a dispute over mining rights had grown into a full invasion. Warships pushed deeper into territory each week. Civilians fled their homes by the millions. Refugee ships crowded every neutral station, and there were not enough supplies for everyone. On Earth, people watched the news reports and felt their hearts break. Children crying in overcrowded shelters, families separated by battle lines, cities burning on worlds that humans had helped build. Every instinct said to help, to intervene, to do something. But the memory of the council vote was still fresh. Humans remembered being called children, being told their voices were worthless, being dismissed after 60 years of faithful service. The anger had not faded. If anything, it had grown stronger. Surveys showed that 94% of humans supported the silence protocol. Politicians who suggested ending it early saw their approval ratings collapse overnight. The message was clear. Humans would not go back to begging for respect. The council had made its choice. Now the council could live with it. In a small apartment on Earth, a young programmer named Danny Cole was working on something that had nothing to do with the war. He was trying to create a new way for humans to communicate with each other, a language that did not use words at all. Danny was 28 years old and had always been fascinated by patterns. He loved music, mathematics, and the strange places where they overlapped. During the silence, he had noticed something interesting. Humans were still finding ways to express themselves to council species when necessary. They used written text and data tablets and automated systems, but these felt cold and mechanical. Danny wanted something warmer. He created a system that translated emotions into musical patterns and mathematical sequences. Happiness became a rising melody in a major key. Sadness became a slow descent in minor tones. Complex ideas could be expressed through combinations of patterns, layers of meaning built on top of each other like a symphony. Danny posted his creation online, expecting a few friends to try it. Within a week, it had spread to every human colony in the galaxy. People called it voiceless. It was not a replacement for speech. It was something new, something that had never existed before. Humans began using it to share feelings that words could not capture. They created songs that told stories without lyrics. They built mathematical poems that expressed philosophical ideas through pure structure. For the first time, humans had a language that belonged only to them. The council could not understand it because the council had never bothered to understand humans in the first place. Danny became famous overnight, though he found the attention uncomfortable. He had not meant to start a cultural revolution. He had just wanted to solve an interesting problem. Meanwhile on Prime, the council was tearing itself apart. Counselor had gathered a coalition of species who wanted to restore human rights and end the silence. They had drafted a formal apology, a complete restoration of voting privileges, and a guarantee that humans would never again be subjected to sudden votes without proper notice. High Arbiter blocked every attempt to bring the proposal to a vote. "We cannot show weakness," insisted in a private meeting with his supporters. "If we apologize to humans, every minor species will think they can throw tantrums to get what they want. The council must maintain order. The council must maintain authority." "The council is losing its authority anyway," replied. She had forced her way into the meeting uninvited. "They are calling us useless. They say we have abandoned them. Two of our member species are at war and we cannot stop it. How is this maintaining order? Silver's face darkened with anger. The war would have happened regardless. Do not blame the Council for ancient hatreds. Ancient hatreds that humans kept controlled for 60 years. Humans who are no longer speaking to us because of your vote. The argument continued for hours and resolved nothing. Would not admit he had made a mistake. His political survival depended on humans being villains who had abandoned the Council out of spite. If he admitted that the Council had driven humans away through mistreatment, his career was finished. But was running out of time. The fleet had assembled near the military analysts predicted the attack would come within days. They had strong defenses, but they were outnumbered. If the fleet reached the planet, billions of civilians would be at risk. General Senna of the sent a desperate message to every species in the Council. We need neutral mediators. We need someone both sides can trust. We need humans. The message was forwarded to human diplomatic channels. It was returned with a simple typed response. We wish the people peace and safety. However, the Council has declared that human voices have no value. We must respect the Council's judgment. General Senna read the message and felt hope drain from her body. She understood what it meant. Humans were not refusing to help out of spite. They were pointing out an impossible situation. How could they mediate when the Council had officially declared them unfit to participate in galactic affairs? Any agreement they helped negotiate could be challenged as invalid. The Council had not just insulted humans. It had removed them from the legal framework of galactic diplomacy. And now the galaxy was paying the price. Made one more attempt. She proposed that the Council temporarily restore human speaking rights for the specific purpose of mediating the conflict. It was a compromise, a small step that would not require to fully admit his mistake. Rejected it. Temporary measures become permanent, he said. Give humans an inch and they will take a light year. We will find another solution. But there was no other solution. The fleet continued its advance. They prepared for a siege, and the humans remained silent, watching a tragedy unfold that they could have prevented if anyone had been willing to listen to them. On Earth, Danny Cole's voiceless system had evolved into something beautiful. Humans were creating art that mixed music and mathematics and emotion in ways that had never been possible before. Concert halls filled with people experiencing shared feelings without a single word being spoken. Scientists discovered that the patterns could express complex theories more elegantly than traditional papers. Poets found new forms of expression that touched the soul directly. The silence had been meant as a protest. It had become something more. It had forced humans to discover what they could create when they stopped trying to explain themselves to people who would not listen. But even as they celebrated this new culture, humans watched the war news with heavy hearts. The fleet was 3 days from prime. Billions of innocent lives hung in the balance, and the Council still would not ask for help in any way that humans could accept. The galaxy held its breath and waited to see who would break first. 10 months into the silence, Counselor made a choice that would change everything. The fleet was 6 days from prime. Satellite images showed the ships moving in formation, their weapons charged, their crews ready for battle. They had prepared their defenses as best they could, but everyone knew it would not be enough. They had more ships, more soldiers, more resources. When the battle came, they would fight bravely and lose. The Council had failed, had tried to organize a combined fleet from neutral species, but no one wanted to risk their own ships in a war that was not their concern. He had tried to threaten them with economic sanctions, but they said they would rather be poor and victorious than rich and humiliated. He had tried everything except the one thing that might work. Decided to try it herself. She boarded a private ship without telling anyone on the Council. She traveled for 2 days through hyperspace routes that skirted the war zone. She arrived at Earth on a cold morning in late autumn, when the leaves were falling from the trees and the sky was heavy with clouds. No council member had visited Earth in decades. The last official visit had been a trade delegation that spent 3 days complaining about the weather and the food. Humans remembered this. They remembered many things. Was met at the landing pad by Director of External Affairs Lane. He was 60 years old, with gray hair and tired eyes and the weight of impossible decisions on his shoulders. He did not speak. He simply handed her a tablet and waited. Typed her request carefully. I am here to ask for help, not as a council member, not as a representative of any government, just as someone who does not want to watch billions of people die. Lane read the message. His expression did not change. He typed a response and showed it to her. Why should we help those who called us worthless? Had expected this question. She had practiced her answer 100 times during the journey. But standing here in the cold Earth morning, looking at a man whose species had been humiliated by her own government, she found that her prepared words meant nothing. She typed the truth instead. I do not have a good answer. The council was wrong, was wrong. What happened to humans was unjust and cruel, and I am ashamed that I could not stop it. But on Prime, there are children who have never heard of the council vote. There are families who have nothing to do with galactic politics. There are teachers and doctors and farmers who just want to live their lives in peace. They will die because of our pride. All of our pride, council and human alike. Lane read this slowly. He did not respond immediately. Instead, he looked up at the cloudy sky and seemed to be thinking about something far away. Finally, he typed, "Come with me." He led her to a government building in a city called Geneva. The building was old and elegant, made of white stone and tall windows. Inside, representatives from every human nation were gathered in a great hall. They had been called together to discuss the crisis. They had been arguing for days without reaching any conclusion. Lane introduced to the assembly. She was the first council member most of them had seen in person. They looked at her with curiosity and anger and something that might have been hope. Was given a tablet to communicate. She typed her message while the room watched on large screens. I come to you not as a diplomat but as a witness. I have seen the council fail. I have seen refuse to admit his mistakes even as the galaxy burns around him. I have no authority to apologize for what was done to you. I have no power to restore what was taken. All I can do is tell you about the people who will die if this war continues. She described She told them about the capital city, where 10 million people lived in buildings carved from crystal. She told them about the farming regions, where families had worked the same land for 1,000 years. She told them about the schools and hospitals and temples that would be destroyed when the bombardment began. She told them about a young mother named Tana who was trying to evacuate her 3 children to safety. The evacuation ships were full. The roads were jammed. Tana had nowhere to go. She had sent a message to the council begging for help. The council had not responded. I am not asking you to forgive, typed. I am not asking you to forget. I am asking you to be who you have always been, the species that helps because helping is right, even when it is hard, even when it hurts, even when those you help do not deserve it. The room was silent for a long moment. Then Lane stood and addressed the assembly. He spoke out loud. It was the first time I'd heard a human voice in 10 months. The sound was strange and beautiful, and it made her want to cry. This is a decision for all of humanity, said. I cannot make it alone. We need to vote. The debate lasted 3 days. Some argued that helping the council would betray everything the silence stood for. Others said that letting innocents die would betray everything humanity stood for. Both sides spoke with passion and conviction. On the 3rd day the vote was held. It was close, closer than anyone expected. Humanity decided to help. But they set conditions. They would not speak to the council as a whole. They would not pretend that everything was forgiven. They would send mediators to the conflict, and those mediators would work to save lives, nothing more. Lane composed a message to the council. It was broadcast on every frequency, sent to every station, displayed on every screen in council space. The message contained one word: tomorrow. On Prime received the message and did not know what it meant. His aides speculated endlessly. Was it a threat, a promise, a riddle? Counselor knew what it meant. She had seen the look in Lane's eyes when humanity voted. It was not joy. It was not triumph. It was something sadder and more complicated. Tomorrow, humans would break their silence, but they would do it on their own terms, and the galaxy would never be the same again. Day 311 of the silence began like any other. The council chamber was crowded with anxious delegates. The fleet was 4 days from Prime. Diplomatic channels had gone quiet. Everyone was waiting for something to happen, though no one knew what. Then the doors opened, and Ambassador Nora walked in. She looked older than she had 10 months ago. There were new lines around her eyes and more gray in her hair. She moved slowly, deliberately, as if each step required careful thought. The chamber fell absolutely silent as she crossed the floor toward the podium where she had left her translation earpiece so many months before. The earpiece was still there. No one had touched it. No one had dared. Nora picked it up and held it in her hand for a moment, looking at it like an old friend she had not expected to see again. Then she placed it in her ear and turned to face the council. "We are not speaking to you because you apologized," she said. Her voice was steady and clear. "You have not apologized. We are speaking because innocent people will die, and we cannot let our pride cost lives, even if you let yours cost our dignity." High Arbiter rose from his seat. "Ambassador, the Council welcomes the return of human participation. Perhaps now we can discuss the terms of your restoration to provisional membership and establish a framework for gradual reintegration into Council activities over the coming years." Nora did not even look at him. "We are not here to discuss our membership. We are here to stop a war. Everything else can wait." The next 48 hours were the most intense of Nora's career. She and her team worked without sleep, moving between and delegations in a neutral station far from the battle lines. The humans did not smile. They did not make small talk. They did not pretend that everything was normal. They mediated with cold precision. They identified the core issues behind the conflict and stripped away the layers of pride and resentment that had built up over centuries. They proposed solutions that neither side would have accepted from anyone else. And somehow, perhaps because both species knew that humans had no reason to favor either side, perhaps because both species could see the cost that speaking again had imposed on human pride, the negotiations moved forward. Admiral of the fleet was a practical man. He had joined the military to protect his people, not to conquer others. When the human mediators presented a solution that gave the most of what they wanted without requiring the destruction of Prime, he was willing to listen. General Senna of the was equally practical. She had prepared to die defending her. She had not expected to live through the week. When the humans offered a path to survival that preserved honor, she grabbed it with both hands. The ceasefire was signed on day 313 of the silence. The news spread across the galaxy within hours. The war was over. The killing had stopped. Billions of lives had been saved by human mediators who had broken their silence just in time. On Prime, High Arbiter attempted to claim credit. He stood in the council chamber and spoke about how his patience had been rewarded, how the humans had returned to their senses, how the council's steady leadership had guided the galaxy through a difficult time. He was shouted down before he finished his first sentence. Counselor rose to speak. "The High Arbiter has led this council into disaster. His refusal to acknowledge human dignity led to the silence. His refusal to apologize prolonged the silence. His refusal to compromise nearly allowed a war to become a genocide. I call for a vote of no confidence." The vote was not close, was removed from office by a margin of 44 to 6. Those 6 were his closest political allies, and 3 of them resigned from the council within the week. Counselor was elected the new High Arbiter. Her first act was to propose the full restoration of human rights with a formal, public apology. The vote passed unanimously. Nora stood before the council to accept the apology. She listened as read the prepared statement, acknowledging the injustice humans had suffered, promising that such treatment would never be repeated, expressing the council's gratitude for human help in ending the war. When finished, Nora spoke carefully. On behalf of humanity, I accept this apology. I hope it is sincere, but I must be clear about something. We found our voice again for the sake of others. We spoke because innocents were dying, not because we forgave the council. If the council forces us to choose between our dignity and our words again, we will choose dignity. And next time we will not come back. The chamber was quiet. Every delegate understood the warning. Humans were not the submissive, eager-to-please species the council had believed them to be. They were proud and patient and capable of standing alone if necessary. The council could work with them as equals or not at all. 6 months later, life in the galaxy had changed in ways no one had predicted. Danny Cole's voiceless system had become an official human art form. It was taught in schools, performed in concert halls, shared across light years. Humans still spoke to council species when necessary, but they had kept something for themselves, a language that belonged only to them, a reminder that their words were a gift and not an obligation. The council had reformed many of its practices. New species were no longer required to serve provisional periods before receiving full voting rights. The High Arbiter could no longer call surprise votes without proper notice. Human mediators were in demand again, perhaps more than ever, because everyone had seen what happened when they. Nora retired from diplomatic service. She returned to Earth and spent her days gardening and reading and watching the rain fall on the city outside her window. Sometimes reporters asked her about the silence, about what it had meant, about what she had felt when she walked out of the council chamber. She always gave the same answer. We learned something important during those 10 months. We learned that we did not need the council's approval to be valuable. We did not need their permission to have dignity. Our worth was never theirs to grant or deny. It was ours all along. On Prime, a mother named Tana told her children the story of the silence. She told them about the humans who had helped save their world even though they had no obligation to do so. She told them about the strange species from the young planet who had proven that strength was not about weapons or wealth or ancient history. It was about knowing your own value and refusing to let anyone take it away. Her children listened with wide eyes. They were too young to remember the war. They would grow up in a galaxy where humans were respected as equals. And somewhere in the stars, the music of Voiceless played on, a symphony of patterns and emotions that spoke louder than any words could ever reach. It was humanity's gift to itself, born from silence, proof that even when others refuse to listen, you can still find ways to sing. The council had pushed too far. The humans had refused to speak, and in that refusal they had found something more powerful than any speech could ever be. They had found their voice.